Are you tired of hearing about more DACA? Looking to play other detachments? Just trying to get back to good old 40K? Well, welcome to Fix My List, where we're going to talk about just playing casual Orc 40K lists or just grinding out those hard GTs and RTT victories. So, welcome to WAAAGH Tactics. We have 3 entries for Fix My List. If you didn't know, what we do is I get some information from the players, such as what terrain layout they typically play on, what units and the core theme of that list that they want to keep. That way I don't gut stuff that they actually want, and what units they actually own. That way I can actually give them valuable suggestions. So, like always, let's start this with the sponsor, Baron of Dice, that allows us to do our paint competition. So check out those high quality dice in the description, as they help us out, and Baron of Dice deserve the love. Then we have Forge Fire Gaming, which is some good old competitive 40K terrain, where they have the bases where the terrain sets can actually fit inside of there, so they don't go sliding around, so you can pick them up and get proper measurements. So check that out if you're looking to play on GW terrain. So what we're going to do is talk about the list that we have put forward, and I wanted to start off with my boy Bulbasaur, where he decided, hey, I run Cult of Speed. I run it with my local friends. It might not be optimal for tournaments, but hey, I have some success and some fun. But with that being said, he was running into some issues. So he wanted to keep some simple things on this, where he was saying he played on GW terrain. And he was facing issues, or he typically plays, I guess I would say, Black Templars, Tau, CSM, Vehicle Heavy Marines, and overall Chaos Knights. So his original list wasn't too different from what we have here. As like I said, I like to keep the core of what people bring. But his original list, I'll simply read it to you, was a Death Killer Wartrike, a War Boss with Faster Than Use, 1 Boy unit, 2 minimum size unit of Gretchen, 2 minimum size unit of Storm Boys, maximum size unit of War Bikers, a Boom Daka Snazwacken, a Daka Jet, 2 Death Dreads, 1 of them with 4 claws and 1 of them with 3 claws and a Scorcha, 1 minimum size unit of Koptas, 3 custom Booster Blasters, 3 Mega Track Scrap Jets, 2 Wrecker Truck Squig Buggies, a Boom Duck, as Boom Blaster Jet, and then a truck. So what he was saying his issues was that he was move blocking himself, that he wasn't actually able to fight too much. Enemies would kind of move block him, and not only him move blocking himself, but move blocking him with the enemies, and the shooting wasn't really that reliable. Mind you, he doesn't actually own what we would typically suggest, which is just throw a bunch of Def Copters on there, run a bunch of bikers. That kind of saturation spam does work very well, right? So if he didn't tell me what he had, and I was just to throw this out here, I'd say run a bunch of bikers, run a bunch of Def Copters, have your reaction move, use Def Killer Wartrikes, da-da-da. Right, and then I understand the value in that, but he doesn't have that, and he still wants to run Death Killer Cult of Speed, as he finds it fun and casual, and he enjoys running his his buggies, and the few Def Copters and bikers that he does have. So let's look at the list that I actually did suggest for him and why some of these things came up. So he did end up painting up and getting a hold of, obviously, the nice Big Mac with shock attack gun. So he didn't have that before on his initial list. I found, based off what he was telling me he was playing into, that he would get a lot of value from the Big Mac with shock attack gun, as long as that typically doesn't change anytime soon. I think they're more likely to change the detachment than really mess with any of the data sheets, such as the Big Mac with shock attack gun. You really want him for the ability to pop enemies transports, in my opinion, the shock attack gun, and those problematic units that are at range that you're not going to be able to get stuck into. Then you have the Death Killer Wartrike. He has WAAAGH Blaster simply because we had 10 points left over. I don't think the enhancements are super mandatory, but they are brought. Now, we have Gaz Gulthraka, the contentious thing here. And you guys know my bias. I do love Gaz. But mind you, I actually didn't suggest Gaz right away to Bulbasaur. He was telling me, based off our suggestion, because whenever I do Fix My List, I discuss things with him, the player, right? So I don't just take a list from you and start making my own stuff behind my head. We have discussions based off what you actually like and want to do, and your anecdotal experiences as a value matters when I start talking to you, right? So context matters, and he's having the issue that we've all kind of felt with the 10-man unit of knobs with war bosses, even with faster than use, or simply in even other detachments, especially outside of Warhorde, is that you have a good chance to bounce off those big toughness problematic units that you might have, and they don't end up pulling their weight in their points. So you end up paying for the truck, the faster than used, the war boss, you wait for the wall, and then boom, they run out and they end up doing a job. And then they get clapped back quite easily by something like Black Templars, for example. So in this case, I like to apply what was called the gas tax. You're playing a detachment that already lacks, efficiency and offense as a whole. And you're going to really pay for that one real reliable damage output unit. Now, is Gaz point for point maybe as efficient as a Breaker Boy unit and Warhorde with a War Boss? Maybe not, and maybe not as efficient as other melee units that you would say is equal to equivalent Gaz's points for what he brings, though. He does help assure that and gain the respect from the enemy. Sometimes it's not even what the enemy knows mathematically is going to happen. It's about what Gaz does and presents to the table with his mere presence and the ability to actually present a fearful WAAAGH. And a lot of the time when you're playing Cult of Speed, the fear of the WAAAGH is what you really need, because the ability to run out and touch your opponent and keep them in the deployment zone, keep enemy tied up in combat, draw them out to get dumb lines of fire onto your big brick of bikers, for example, that might reactive move away from their charging unit if it's like a Black Templar matchup like he spoke about. Then you have the response that Gaz can actually employ a successful charge that becomes interesting. If the enemy plays too aggressive into you, Gaz is actually a nice heroic intervention unit, because since he doesn't have too much redundancy in Koptas and bikers, he might actually have CP in other cases to pull off a heroic intervention, which is something that I think orcs a lot of the time lack doing. Now, do I reserve my gas? Typically not, but because you don't have a lot of units that are going to be taking advantage of his big brick of lethal, there's a chance that you can simply get away with not bringing that I'm sorry, not simply putting Gaz right in the middle. But a lot of the time I'm going to. Sorry, I was making sure that I did pay for the 10 boys. Okay. Because I was like, 10 boys I got on the list. Hey. So yeah, Gaz is going to be centralized, and I'll just say it right now. Yes, I did pay for the 5 mega nubs. Hard to kind of hide them safely, like you would say, but we're going to have some board control with this army as we to go forward and talk about it. And there's some suggestions I can suggest even as we keep talking about this. But Gaz, chats, this is live. You can talk about anything, even the docket attachment. This is just an open chat. As like I said, I've already spoken about Bulbasaur. So then we have a 10-man unit of boys. Now, the reason I like boys is you're already playing a fragile army. In some cases, you could argue that if you want to move points around, you can just simply pay for a Snick Rot that can kind of lure enemy into getting into range to shoot at you. But boys work in a way that, one, they can actually be a skirmish unit, and they can sticky objectives while everybody moves up. Flip objectives by just putting a bunch of OC on it. And in a lot of the case, that's really what you're going to be looking at in this army is you're really just about staying power, playing the mission. Everything's kind of cheap. Nothing's too important. In this case, Gaz and then the shock attack guns are really the only like big point values here. So anything else for something like an Oath or a Grudgeon or whatever it may be isn't like super amazing, right? Not that these units are super durable, but when you get in these little skirmish fights, the enemy can end up not really taking out bikers. It's happened. I've run bikers, run them in different detachments. Sorry, excuse me, buggies, right? So when you have boys as well to get stuck in there for more bodies to really saturate the enemy, it's nice. So boys are cool. Boys are great. Then we have the Boondocka Snaz Wagon. He just simply brought a bunch of buggies. And if we're playing Cult of Speed and you don't have the bikers, you don't got the Koptas, then you got to bring some buggies. So we have two Def Treads. I'm sorry, one Def Tread on this list. Now, he did start with two Def Treads. We ended up copping them for points, right? Kick him off the list. Not that he sucks, not that he's horrible, but this Def Tread is going to be more employed as the rapid ingress target, right? So you can see already when we're looking at this list, we're looking at one, he doesn't have the saturation of what is optimal for the detachment necessarily for every CP point to be worth it, right? It's not going to be worth it necessarily every turn to be like 4 up invuln on my Mega Track Scrapjet. It might be worth it sometimes though. But it might sustain hits on Mega Truck Scrapjet. You're probably not that worth it. But Custom Booster Blaster, right? They're not gonna get, it's not gonna do the damage for the most part, mathematically speaking. So, what are other ways that could be interesting, right? Boys can also employ grenades, but Def Treads, you could argue maybe in horrible cases you could do a last minute, tank shock, right? And then as for the depth charge, like I said, they're the built-in rapid ingress to this army. So a lot of the time you're going to reserve this guy, and then he is going to be kind of coming in from the table edge, as hopefully you're already occupying space when you're playing your bikers. You should playing the edges of the table. Your def copters will possibly be in reserve as well. Or in this army, you might even want to keep them on the table sometimes. So then we have the minimum size unit of Gretchen. I like to have more Gretchen if I can. So if anybody wanted to employ more, throw them on your list. I'm never going to argue with them. Love me some good odds. 1 unit of commandos. Now I find commandos very, very important for playing Cult of Speed. Overall, for Pride and Nyx itself, commandos are really important, right? Mandos lead the way. But for Cult of Speed specifically, because what we spoke about with you blocking yourself in your deployment zone with your Cult of Speed army, not being able to actually take up table space, and the enemy being able to use your big bases at your disadvantage, right? One big 6-man unit of Nurglings is stopping your army, right? You're not going to have good investments to get, go get stuck and shoot them even to get them out of your way. You're going to end up starting to charge the Nurglings and stuff gets dumb. So it's like, you do want some commandos, or in some cases, like we would talk about, big Gene Stealer bricks, World Eater bricks. So if armies can actually problematically run into your Cult of Speed or your parking garage army, your parking lot army, you can have problems. Like Orc trucks, for example, could be a similar parking lot issue if you're playing like War Horde with 6 trucks. So I like commandos for this Cult of Speed, so you can occupy space. Let's say you play Search and Destroy, you can kind of have that natural spot that you can open up space, and then that's where you can end up bringing in more of your own reserves. And that's where you can even start to argue, where you can start suggesting a shock jump dragster instead of another custom booster blaster. Now, the 2 custom booster blasters are interesting because they each obviously can pick targets to make enemies -1 to hit. In some cases, like if you're making CSM, pack bound zealots -1 to hit, they're just re-rolling more stuff and they might end up critically even better. But in some cases, it's actually nice, like we said about skirmishes, where one of these units gets in a fight. If it's shooting down and making something -1 to hit, that could be pretty sweet. But as we spoke about specifically for taking table space, there's a good shot that maybe a shock jump dragster can jump somewhere where a commando unit is or will be, and commandos move up and continue to play in the game. Sometimes commandos can get off early game charges or move blocks, and you might need something to immediately take that space, like we said in the Search and Destroy. That's where you can argue one of these custom booster blasters or one of these 3 mega track scrap jacks gets changed out for a shock jump dragster. So like I said, even though this is the list I finalized when I showed him, there's still argument for a lot of things on here because Cult of Speed, has its own theme. Yet each buggy has like a tool utility that I think is forgotten about, that people should value and says in practical assets, right? I like my shotgun dragster just because movement wins games, right? But 1 is probably good enough. And you still get to shoot his gun, hey, right? Then you get the big, like I said, a custom Mega Knob unit. I do like to pay for simply have 1 claw and 1 power claw. 1 saw and 1 power claw, because I need to be able to pick the better weapon for the target I'm going to go into. The guns are nice, but it's kind of like fancy. It's when it's go time and it's wall to get stuck in, you need those guys to get their hits in. So 3 mega track scrap jets. My boy's just a fan of them, and so am I. So stick to them. Didn't want to take any out of the lift. Let's keep those boys. Now, you did drop 1 Rucker truck because it helped pay for the mega knobs, it helped pay for the mandos. That's okay. He can still end up playing like defensively for you, doing some nice indirect piddly, and then running up and trying to throw one of his squig bomb at people and getting those D6 mortal wounds off. It's not the squig bomb. It's squig mine. Sorry, excuse me. 2 5-man unit of Storm Boys, because you still like that. A lot of the time you want to keep 1 of those on the table at least, if sometimes 2, but 1 on the table at least, somewhere within 12 inches of the center of the table. That way they can run up and do secondaries early in the game if they have to, as long as it's worth it. Don't do it for 2 points. But your second one, nice little deep strike boy, keep the enemy honest. If you have to run them up to occupy space, like we spoke about with Search and Destroy, maybe you want 2 of them on the table as well, just so you can run up for more space. But mandos make it so you don't have to do that. That's just in the case that you don't pay for the shotgun jacks, like we just spoke about. But 2 Storm Boys, sick. I've played with this 1, don't like it. Playing with 3, sometimes I'm like, all right, I could have just had 2. So 2's my sweet lucky number. Now, then we have the 1 unit of tank bosses with the shock attack gun. Since we are already talking about how we're going to be occupying space, playing the table edges, and then having gas secure the middle of the table, that means we're going to imply that we have some lanes to come in from reserve and to shoot the enemy down. Now, there are some deployments and some missions, some deployments where you're going to be able to stage in the terrain piece and actually just pop out and shoot the enemy as well. So be open to that. Don't just systematically put them in reserves. But one tank plus a unit coming off the table edge, getting some shots off is nice. And so keep in mind that sometimes just getting this shock attack gun to peek himself just a little bit, and then shoot down an enemy lane might be enough to pop an enemy transport in some cases. So yeah, you got to be stingy or be very, very limited when you do something like that, because you only have one tank buster unit, but it is an option. And then the big old brick of 6 war bikers. I simply love war bikers for cult of speed. I would have more if my boy could have more, but he only had one max unit of 6. That's all good. We'll make it work with the Death Killer War Track, right, Jank? Whoa to my boy, and shout out to everybody who's here right now. Of course, feel free to say, stuck in, comments, ignore, argue, talk about what's going on at Adepticon, whatever you guys got on the brain. And of course, Jank, you've been rocking Cult of Speed. So if you think I did a good job, let me get a war for at least how I suggest this list. Now this was already having success on his own with Cult of Speed. So I enjoyed that he brought this, and I hope he does well. And with that being said, let's move on to the next list from our get Eldar Starspawn, the Bullet Boys. So we had to get that really wanted to run Bully Boys. Now, this is one that I went back and forth with a lot. There are a lot of things that we can call into question about this list that I like and that I dislike. In the sense that I'm like, man, it's not for everybody, is what I would say for this list. Is right off the bat, I'll say very elite. But he does understand what I'm trying to do and what he's trying to do here with these big bricks of OC mobs and really utilizing the double bully boy mob and the pressure and the board control his army can get from this. So let's talk about his bully boys list. Now, for his original list, let me read it off to you, Gits. Shout out to the chat. Let's see, make sure I didn't mess this up, because I like that he was already having good success with Bully Boys. And like I said, Bully Boys is one of those detachments that's sick. Shout out to this Git because he's a channel member. And like I said, channel members get priority on all this. So if you're a channel member and you hit me up, then just say that and your list will be going first for sure. What's good? That's you up, Derek. So for his first list, because I had it here, I'm gonna read it real quick. He had Snickrock, Gaz, Mazrog, Warboss, and Mega Armor. He had a Warboss and Mega Armor with the big gob, and then Zog. He said he loves Zod, and I really appreciate that too, because I have Zod on my personal Bully Boys list as well. I think having something that can run out and be very, very fast and gain the respect of the enemy, clear space, and cause enemy to actually invest in something to get closer to you, or to just kind of centralize and focus on this big mob, is a good way to get something for the rest of your bully boy second mob to get stuck in. And we've seen people run like 2 units of 20 boys with pain boys. Zod pays for like a cheaper version of that, so he was already doing something like that. Then he had 2 trucks, 1 big unit of Gretchen, then 2 minimum-sized unit of Gretchen, 3 bricks of Mega Knobs. 2 of them had twin kill saws, and then 1 of them had 5 saws and 5 claws, a big brick of Squig Hog boys, and then 1 unit of Storm boys. So I liked what he had a lot of his list, and we went back and forth about, hey, do you want to run a bunch of Mega Knobs? Do you run a bunch of mobs of boys? There's an idea of you could run like a pain wall centralized, where there's a lot of just feel no pains built out throughout your list and different kind of durability. And in this case, that's what he ended up bringing to the table when we ended up talking it out. So we have Boss Snake Route when utilized with this lone op. Don't give him away early. Don't let him die, in my opinion, for this matchup specifically. He's going to be scoring you points. He's going to be securing you space. He's going to be tagging objectives and staying in the game for a hot minute, hopefully for you, or just dropping like 15 points on secondaries for you. So Boss Snake Route is important to kind of bait the enemy closer to you. Yes, you do have commandos on this list, but they're not going to be used the same, and they should not be attached to each other. Do not attach your Snake Route to your mandos. Now we have Gazgul. He said, do I really want to pay for gas? But at the end of the day, he said he did want the gas, because that's what the core of what his thematic list wanted to be. Now, he argued it with himself and said, well, if I'm going to play gas, why am I not going to play Warhorde, right? And in that case, it's just simply about utilizing the wall to have pressure and kind of just continue to bulldoze your opponent. So in this case, he ended up having a pain boy and a war boss. We're going for those 20-man unit of boys to be taking advantage of possibly that early wall or even that second wall. The war boss makes them have that flexibility in that. The pain boy makes it so that now I have to kill the 20 boys with the 5-up Feel No Pain and the 5-up Invul, and I have to kill Zagrat Warzenegger with his 5-up Invul -1 to wound. Mind you, now Zod is much faster and can cover space, but will you actually imply that the battle wagon is taking up space, minimizing the profile of the boys, blob. You can also have Gaz near that battle wagon to secure, a nice heroic intervention to discourage something like World Eaters from running straight into that battle wagon. Run enemies in general, just trying to get close to it and stopping the units from being able to disembark. There are some times where enemies will shoot that wagon and then have enemies that are close enough to charge in, or just stop you from charging just enough to stop the disembarking. Gaz helps kind of negate that as well. And then Zakrin can utilize his speed on his own to be somewhere else staged up on the battlefield. Now, that's the point of why you don't bring 2 20-man unit of boys, because sometimes that second one, you can actually, like he said, he plays on WTC as well. I mean, GW as well. I think our third person we're going to cover is the WTC. Yeah, and so then he plays on GW as well. So in that case, I didn't feel like 2 wagons would be secured nicely, and being able to stage the 20 boys and them not just be slow can sometimes be problematic. So then we secured, hey, there we go for Zod. What I will say is sometimes when I make my Bully Boys list, I only put like 2-3 characters on the list, and those are very successful as well. So it was a lot of back and forth to get us even to this point. Now we have the War Boss and Mega Armor with the Telepoa, right? The best, in my opinion, strategic reserve option that orcs have, possibly in like their detachment. And I don't mean that in like the best point for point. I just mean it feels the best because it's an actual true deep strike, and you're bringing in a unit that doesn't simply get shot away, especially if the wall's already activated. And then it actually takes advantage because it's typically pretty slow. So it feels just really good when you can actually have that, and it makes up for, you're going second. So the War Boss and Mega Armor helps that too. And like I said, you should be taking up space because you do have commandos on this list. And you have Boss Snickra. So he could be safe just to make sure that enemies don't, like we spoke about. A lot of the time I'm thinking Search and Destroy here, where orc players are, getting kind of funneled into certain spots, calling an early WAAAGH, and then just getting shot up because the enemy starts dropping in reserves, dropping in their deep strikes, making their charges, staging up on the orcs instead. That's where you really need Mandos, wagons, and such. So, and we still did pay for at least 1 truck. So, what we do have here as well, after we talk about the wagon, the big brick of Gretchen, the 20 boys, we have 2 minimum size units of Gretchen. That way you can secure your own backfield, or you can simply use one of those small units of Gretchen early in the game to start running up and playing the game early. We have Mandos, like we said, but what we have that's more appealing to me, yet was something that I brought up to this get myself, was what if we include a unit of Mega Knobs that does not have a character to lead it? So simply a leaderless Mega Knob, right? So we have 1, which is the War Boss with Mega Armor, and then 1 with the Gazgul Thraka, right? It comes down to, do I want to pay another 90 points for a War Boss and Mega Armor, and then just lose more assets, lose more stuff? Do I want to pay for a Big Mac when I'm not really worried about getting shot and trying to regen guys and playing that slow game? So it comes down to, this is where you're running the Big Mac, the normal Mega Knobs are running in first. Maybe these guys are actually using the reroll hit strat. Maybe these guys are coming in on the second one. They're using reroll hit strat, whatever it may be. But they don't cost as much character investment and over investment to just get into another fight. These are more for harassing the enemy's objective possibly as well, and just kind of staying alive, maybe touching enemies that you're like, well, I wasn't going to kill this anyways, but I know that he's not reliably going to one-shot my 5 Mega Knobs with the 5 of Feel No Pain. So in that case, that's where you can at least run those guys up into there while everybody else gets into true fights, because sometimes there are units that you're like, I'm going to have to eat this interrupt, and I'm gonna have to fight on death with this other unit. Well, in this case, this is that third option unit that he's like, well, if he dies over here, those guys are at least going to keep him alive and stuck there for the next movement phase, and I can just activate one of these units first instead, and then fight on death with my other Mega Knob unit. Those guys are just going to hold them still for a hot minute, or they get stuck in with the boys or with Zod. So if you're going in with boys and Zod, then you're more inclined to use this unit that doesn't have a leader to be your CP investment. For example, like if you don't have a good, let's just say you didn't drop your War Boss and Mega Armor in, and you put them in a truck, you know, there's a chance that he's still kind of waiting for his go turn. These guys can end up playing the game instead. You don't always have to go for the deep strike and rapid ingress option, but typically it's advised, right? But like when I play World Eaters, for example, there's not too much deep striking I'm doing going on there. A lot of the time, my assets will be on the table. And then yeah, so then we have, like I see, 3 units of 5 mega nubs. Now for Gaz's unit, I am gonna have saws and power claws. As for the other 2 units, what I would say is for the one without a leader, I would just use mega power claws and kill saws as well. That way I can just choose whatever I want them to fight. And then the unit that's being led by the war boss and mega armor, I'd use twin kill saws. That's my opinion. If you could like just separate them out, if you want to keep it simple, twin kill saws like you had it is fine too. And then last but not least, 2 units of Storm Boys. It was actually hard not to get the second truck in, and not it was hard to get the second truck in or a 3rd unit of Storm Boys. So what I would say here, the weaknesses to this unit is that you're low on assets, and if the enemy has something like indirect fire or very fast capabilities to get guns to your scoring units, then you need to play them even more safely, securely, utilize deep strike, and make sure you're staged up well. So if the enemy does go for one of your scoring assets, you can start the momentum of the tide of Zod running forward, the boys barfing out of the wagon, and then Gaz staging up, giving out that lethal aura, and then on the second wall, Gaz, and then another unit of Mega Knobs runs in and helps start clearing more assets, and just keeping that momentum up and that pressure. So this is the Bully Boys list that we both agreed upon, and I personally liked. Now, I don't say it's for everyone because it is quite elite, but there's some players that really can still make these big character heavy lists work. So with that being said, we move on to last but certainly not least. This is my get backslide. So backslide was backsliding on his suggestion what detachments he wanted to play, but I understand that theory because orcs are so exciting as they have a lot of different options for detachments, right? You know, Daka might end up changing here very soon. That's what most people are suggesting and assuming. And so my boy Backslide was like, well, I want to play the hunt, but I play on WTC terrain. And I was just matter of frank with him. And I said, if you're playing WTC terrain, there's not much, and the hunt, there's not much flexibility here. I'm not really going to advise kill rigs. I'm most likely going to rely to something that looks similar to a Warhorde SWAT team threat saturation combo of triple beast bosses and Snaggas. And in that case, he just said, well, then let's talk about some tactical. And in all, he was just excited about most orc detachments. So we'll just stay tactical for now, and he's playing WTC. One thing that he really wanted to keep on his list that was a bit for thematic purposes was Mazrog, Scragbag, and some Squig Hog boys. Now, he did have even more than this. He had a bunch of Squig Hog boys. But without them being double orders, I find it very, very hard to get them on the list. As I have ran them, but having Mazrog himself becomes appealing, right? And I'll talk about that when we talk about Maz and how I use him and keep him on the how I used him and I kept him on the list, because I personally have run Mazrog Scragbag in Tactical Brigade prior to the changes, and he wasn't like bar for it. He was cool. I enjoyed it. So we have a beast boss. Now, typically, I'm not crazy beast boss like lover, as in like run 3x10 every list. Oh, they are excellent units though. So a lot of time I do run 2x10 and war hordes, but even in Tactical Brigade, because you have access to sustain hits, and you have access to fall back and shoot and charge. So if you end up staying alive, or if you end up just getting a fight in general, popping off sustain with your beast bosses mean they have that good capability to get great spikes and damage for the beast boss himself. Now, what's also cool and I find valuable is even outside of the wall, which is what I always talk about the value is of a beast boss and snaggers themselves, is that they can kill stuff outside of the wall. Outside of the wall, if you go into a big brick of something that's T3 and you really just need something to clear it out, and it's there, and you know there's a chance that you can just pop +1 strength and then bust through enemy units. Like people would say, well, this normally isn't typically worth it. Well, I've had it where I've popped an AdMech vehicle and then they kill like 3 of my boys in shooting, and then I run into an AdMech unit where they're typically -1 to hit, But if I can wound them on 2s, it really helps actually offset the fact that I'm -1 to hit on them, and I can end up still picking up that unit. I know because it's happened several times, and the math says it makes a big difference if I can offset it with +1 to wound. So even outside of the wall, I could win these skirmish fights with T5 units and then pick up big bricks of T3 units. So that's why even in Tactical Brigade, I stuck with the Beast Boss. Then we have the Big Mech and because we were looking at, we need a counter charge asset. Sorry, I jumped back right away there. We need a counter charge unit. And the first suggestion that I had here, Daniel, show us up, Daniel, was Breaker Boys, right? And Breaker Boys are like, well, they don't really get too much value from being in Tactical Brigade. They can get +1 strength. But I needed the points for other stuff because there's a lot of characters in this detachment. And so therefore, if I'm stuck on I need something for punching, a lot of times I'll run down to, if I'm going for cheaper, if I'm not paying the gas tax, then I go down to the Beast Boss, what I say, Beast Boss, maybe cheap price or whatever you want to call it, for deal, right? The Beast Boss deal, we'll call it. So we have the Big Mech and Mega Armor. Even with the increase, he's still totally optimal. Amazing unit. Everybody knows about him. We have 2 Big Mechs with shock attack guns, and then one of them is Mork's Cunning. Now, typically someone say, why would you do that? Don't you want to put these guys in trucks? If more Cunning is on the table, then I can't put them in the truck. That's okay. I actually think in some, in a good amount of matchups, you actually might find some value from keeping one of your shock attack guns on the table to threaten that you're going to just immediately stage them to walk out through terrain and shoot. And then the other one can maybe run out and get line of sight by shooting his guns as well. But 2, you can actually pick him up and put him up in reserve, and you can just stage up more aggressively with the rest of your army, as I think Mork's Cunning itself is very, very valuable. Now, there's an argument that you could put it on a Beast Boss unit, but you can't go back into a vehicle. So I really like it be for a unit that I'm already okay with just staying on the table or jumping in reserve. Then we have Mazrog's Crack Bag. Now, Mazrog and the Squig Hog Boys still aren't worth it, in my opinion. For their points, quite expensive, and the squigs actually make him slower because you have to pay for the 1-inch pivot. That being said, giving them stealth does make a difference if it's the wall. And typically, if you do get that charge off on them, they can also become an interesting rapid ingress target if you reserve them. But if you do end up getting just natural running up on the wall and getting charge targets off on them, when the enemy does choose to clap back, once you have Beast Bosses on your face, Zagrot Wartsnag on your face, tank busters in the backfield, Big Mech with shock attack guns regenning guys, it becomes, and you have tank busters possibly still hanging around somewhere. It becomes one of those cases where they might not have all the assets to straight up kill all the squigs and Maz, and then Maz ends up becoming an interesting target for falling back, shooting and charging, right? Or Maz becomes an interesting target for popping an additional +1 OC. So because maybe he's not even battle shocked, and you don't have to worry about taking battle shock tests because just his dudes are gone and he's totally fine because those guys died. And then he also lets them fight on death if they're in a fight. So when it comes down to him getting clapped back after he gets his charge off, now Maz himself becomes interesting because he's going to just jump out of a fight and then continue momentum and aggression, which is what I really like about when I played him in Tactical Brigade. And then he's giving himself the order after that. So he's like running back, yelling at himself or yelling at someone else to give him an order. And that someone else, in some cases, could be Zagrot Wartsnagga. So then you have Zagrot Wartsnagga, which is amazing. We know because Daka, but he was always been amazing. And in this case, in Tactical Brigade, if you can find a way to end up giving him an order from whether it's Maz, whether it's a shock attack gun, you can end up making him very, very annoying with stealth. Even without that, though, he's quite durable just naturally out of his with -1 to wound and 5 up invuln. And you really need that speed. You need that speed. You need that presence to be able to say, hey, I might not be able to kill or deal with this Norn emissary, this land raider, this demon Primarch, something like that. Zagrot gives you that time, buys you that time, and he turns off the enemy primary objective. So that's where Zagrot becomes interesting, even in this detachment. And then, like I said, 10 Snaggas, 2 5-man unit of Storm Boys. You can argue for more. There are builds for more. 2 units of 5 burners. Now, these become interesting because let's just say that you just switch Mork's Cunning onto the Beast Boss because you find that more appealing. And you just say, I'm going to stick the tank busters, and then 2 units of 5 burner boys in the trucks. Now you have 2 SWAT teams, and then your third truck can be used for your big unit of flash kits or your beast bosses, because there are some cases where you could argue putting your big mech and mega armor into reserves could be appealing as well. So that's actually some ways that could be played so they can get different lines of fire. I do suggest tinkering and learning how to play with that, because we have to get used to the changes with this detachment. Then we have 1 minimum size unit of Gretchen, the big brick for Zod, a unit of Mandos, because how are you going to play this attachment without commandos, right? No, I'm just kidding. It's really about what I've been saying this whole time is in Prime Nexus, playing the early game, stopping the enemy from holding your deployment zone, setting the tempo, being able to counter, search, and destroy. There are a lot of cases where commandos will become valuable, interesting, and then in some cases you could just pick them up, or you can just, in the games that you don't want them to be there because you don't, let's say against Custodes, where you don't want to give away an early game charge, simply keep your commandos in reserve and then put them somewhere else, or keep them really close to you and actually use them as a move blocking screen. If you're going to have the issue of we're just going to fight it, duke it out in the middle. So there are cases where you just put commandos in reserve and bring them off the table edge, or just leave them on the table and then put them in reserve so they get a cooler version of reserves. Then we have for later games, right, 4 or 5. Ingressing reserve coming in from reserve. Then we have the squigs, like I said, minimum size unit, 2 tank busters, and then the 3 chucks. So that's the total list. This list is a bit elite, bit character heavy, like we said. If there was any suggestions to be made, you could tinker with not having beast bosses and snagger boys, or in finding ways to get more assets. But in a lot of cases, this has enough assets. You have 3 chucks, 2 5-man units of storm burner boys, a small unit of Gretchen to hold your hold objective, and then 2 storm boys. So you do actually have a lot of little assets. You just can't throw them all away early game, right? So you got to be nice and stingy with it. Turn 1, maybe even turn 2. If you are exposing yourself with this, it would be your tank busters are exploding. They're very valuable assets with guns. And if you're doing a WAAAGH early, it's because Zod is getting great board positioning and Maz is getting maybe a charge off early. The burner boys help in these like little fights that you might get in where, hey, I'm dealing with some little Eldar. I need this little dude to do a reserve action. You can put a burner boy in reserve. You can put him getting out of trucks, whatever it could be. These 5-man units just become valuable, and I just have more activations to do stuff. So set them in locations, whether it's along the sides of the table to be doing secondaries, or they're in transports to act as cool SWAT teams. But the idea with the burner boys was just to have more assets and to actually layer, some firepower on units, because we did get a little nerfs in some cases, so we didn't have much orders to really saturate the gun lines. But burner boys are still quite cool in that case. And don't sleep on the custom mega blasters. So with that being said, that was Fix My List. So be sure, if you want to do Fix My List, you do it every month, hit me up. Tell me if you're a member or a Patreon member firstly, of course, so that I can prioritize you. And of course, we'll talk about what you're trying to do with your list, get some context for what level you're trying to take it to, what you actually own, any SKUs that you're looking to keep or retain, and some issues you're facing and the meta that you are going into. So of course, with that being said, stay tuned for our next set of tactical videos that we're going to be coming out with. We're in a weird spot because DAKA might end up getting nerfed here, so we didn't want to make content on that. But we have how to use orc transports. We just made that SWAT team video, and we have so much more coming in. Stay tuned for the membership videos that are going to come out that we're going to record. We're going to do a video with Noah and the Green Tide champion that he is, so we're going to be able to have some good info on that, and hopefully so much more. So stay tuned, and thank you for all the support. With that being said, there's only one thing to keep in mind is don't cross our wall, because we not get TFL. Whoa!